Hello, my name's Vince Cobley from the Land Rover Owner Adventure Club. Most people never go off-road driving because they think they could damage their vehicle or they think it's too difficult. At Land Rover Owner magazine, we try our best to assist our readers in every possible way when it comes to off-road driving. In this film, we're going to try and demonstrate to you the techniques and skills required to ensure that your off-road driving be safe and adventurous. We're going to start with the two basic four-wheel drive systems. This is how it all started, a series Land Rover. Part-time four-wheel drive, which means the rear axle's driving probably for a lot of the vehicles 90% of the time. It has the capability to push a lever which will transfer via the transfer box in the gearbox. 50% of the drive will come to the front axle, which means we now have an even 50-50 split. 50% of the drive is on the back axle, the other 50% is on the front axle. This, however, is its modern day equivalent, the Land Rover 90 Defender, permanent four-wheel drive. You don't have to think when to select the front axle, it's already selected for you. To understand the technicalities of this one, however, we're going to be coming back to this vehicle a little bit later. So, when do we use four-wheel drive? For most people, as I said before, we're driving down the road in rear-wheel drive only. If we came into a site like this, if we lived in certain parts of the country where it had been snowing or that has got the capability to have snow, we may need extra traction at certain times of the year. But it's not really rough terrain. So we engage four-wheel drive in the high gearbox. As I said before, it transfers 50% of the drive to the front axle, but it does not change the overall gear ratios. However, we came into terrain like this and then moved over onto what the sections that you can see over there that we'll be going into later on. Hills, steep drops, climbs, axle articulation sections, deep mud, water. We need the capability to alter the torque figures of the vehicle and to go a little bit slower. So we have another lever that we can use. That is the low gearbox transfer lever. We do that, we have to stop the vehicle and it changes the gear ratios within the vehicle. Third gear in the low gear box is the equivalent gear ratio to first gear in the high box. However, a common misconception is that the word four-wheel drive means that all four wheels rotate evenly at the same time. We're now going to move this vehicle and we're going to show you that with the aid of suspension and the differential, this is wrong. Okay, now we've repositioned the Land Rover, let's try and show you what a differential does. This is the wheel. The wheel is attached to the axle. The axle has a differential, which is a load of gears really inside the axle. They distribute the drive left and right via the half shafts, but their main objective is to allow one wheel on an axle to rotate faster than the other. Ray, if you can just show us. As you can see now, we're in part-time four-wheel drive. Ray's driven away, but we're going nowhere because the differential, unfortunately, has sent the drive on the back axle to the wheel with the least resistance. If you can see, the far side wheel isn't rotating at all. It's stopped. We have got a one-wheel drive. Okay, Ray, now what we're going to show, we're going to put it into four-wheel drive. The common conception there is that all four wheels rotate evenly at the same time. Now, as you can see, we've engaged four-wheel drive, but the front wheel's not turning, and as you can see diagonally across the car, the rear wheel's not turning. We've in fact only got a two-wheel drive car, but it's the two wheels with the least resistance. Later on in the program, we're going to try and explain to you a little bit more into that, about the terrain and about how a suspension affects that. Now, there is one problem with part-time four-wheel drive on hard surfaces. If you leave it in four-wheel drive for too long, you cause a problem that's caused transmission wind-up or gearbox wind-up. Let's go over here and I'll try and explain to you what causes transmission wind-up. Okay, as you can see in this conveniently muddy area, we just brought a vehicle through here and turned it on full lock. And as you can see, we've got 4 wheel marks. 1, 2, 3, 4. These are the wheels on the right hand side of the vehicle, the offside. These 2 over here are the wheels on the inside. This is the front wheel, this is the rear wheel. Front wheel, rear wheel. So as you can see, even the 2 wheels on the same side of the car are travelling in a different radius. But you can also see by the 4 wheel marks, these are the 2 front wheels, these are the 2 rear wheels, that the actual wheels on the back axle are actually turning a shorter corner. So let's say for instance that the vehicle here, that the front wheels are turning a 20-foot turning circle. The back wheels, however, are doing an 18-foot turning circle, which in reality means that the gearbox should be sending out the front prop shaft rotated at 100 revolutions, but the back one really needs to go out at 80 revolutions. But it can't do that. It's trying to distribute it out evenly. Because of the traction of a four-wheel drive, what tends to happen is that the gearbox main shaft actually winds up. It physically starts to twist. Now, it's fine off-road if it does twist, because when you're in the mud, in the snow, a wheel will spin now and again. It will unwind itself. However, if you forget, leave wherever you've been off-roading, Welsh mountains, a quarry, if you forget about it, get onto the main road where you've got lots of grip with the weight of a four-wheel drive, the wheels cannot unwind, they cannot contra-rotate, and eventually something shears in the transmission system. It'll be the weakest point. It could be a half shaft, or it could be the teeth and the gearing in the differential. So, be aware of that. Be aware that if the steering becomes heavy, what's causing that? Have I got a puncture? Or is my transmission wound up? Am I having problems changing gear? Is the car decelerating quicker? They're the sort of signs that you're looking for. But unfortunately, there are no visual signs as such. You can hear it sometimes. You can hear the back wheel trying to contra-rotate, trying to spin backwards to unwind itself. But earlier on, we mentioned the Land Rover Defender 90. That's a permanent four-wheel drive vehicle. Why doesn't that get gearbox wind up? Let's go and show you now. Here we are back at the Land Rover Defender, the successor to the series Land Rover, permanent four-wheel drive, which means the front and the back axles are permanently driven, as opposed to the series Land Rover, which only has rear-wheel drive and you have to select front-wheel drive. So if both axles are driving, why doesn't it get transmission or gearbox wind-up? It's because built into the gearbox of this model is another differential. And the differential in the gearbox works exactly the same ways as the differential on the axle. Whereas the differential on the axle distributes the drive left and right, the gearbox differential distributes the drive front and back. It allows the vehicle to turn without the shafts in the gearbox winding up. Let's try and just show you how that works. Okay, Edward, if you could just start the car, please. As you can see, we've only got one-wheel drive. So what's happening there? Go back to the middle again. Now, what's actually happened is that the centre differential sent the drive to the axle on the vehicle with the least resistance. In this case, it's the rear axle. Then the differential on that axle has sent the drive to the wheel with the least resistance, giving us one-wheel drive. How do we overcome that? Simple. These cars have a high and low gear lever. The high and low gear lever can be selected on the move. You simply push the lever across to the left and it locks the centre differential. That is all it does. It's a bit of a misconception because some people think it locks it all up. It doesn't. It locks the centre differential up. It automatically distributes the drive and gives you 50% drive at the front and at the back. Ed, if you'd just like to show us that, please. Let's put the gear lever across to the left. It's distributed out. As you can see now, we are back in the same mode as the series Land Rover. One wheel on each axle, the wheel with the least resistance. And that is the best we get with this model of vehicle. But progress. We now have come to the point where we've got rid of the part-time four-wheel drive, where we have to think about putting into four-wheel drive. They gave us permanent four-wheel drive. But people still have to think and know when to put that diff lock in. However, the new breed of vehicle has a viscous coupling gearbox. Let's try and show you how that works, because that does the thinking for you. Thanks, Ed, if you can change the vehicles. Here we are again, same place, different car. Okay, so that's the Series 2. Let's go to its successor, the 90 Defender permanent four-wheel drive with coil spring suspension. Let's see how that tackles this terrain. So again, we put it into low gearbox. First gear, slightly just above tick over, not quite engine revving like before. Some of you may turn around and look at it and think, oh, he's got better tyres on, but they are worn, I can assure you that. So it eased it into the situation, eased it in again. Now, first thing that you may have noticed there was that we had a lot more clearance. Slightly bigger tyres, which helps, but look at the adaptability through that terrain just there. It's actually incredible. Look at it. Now this is where Ray got stuck. Look at that, a little bit of wheel spin, but the Defender carried on through. That just shows that its suspension has actually got more adaptability. It's got more wheel travel, which keeps the wheels in contact longer with the ground. The noise that you can hear as you're picking up is just the power steering. It's actually on full lock coming round there. So if you listen to the engines, that's the main point you can hear as well. The suspension is obviously better, but listen to the engine. Just above tick over. Just applying that little bit of power when it needs it, just to climb out of the wet hills. Now, some people say that the short wheelbases are better. The 90 is actually 2 inches longer wheelbase than the Series 2 Land Rover that we just used earlier on. So a lot of people say that its ramp, breakover angles, departure angles, etc. are better. We're going to come to that shortly and show you the difference. But now we're going to move over to the 110 Defender, a longer wheelbase car. Let's see how that tackles this terrain. As before, the cars have already engaged low gearbox. See, they back off before the situation, ease right off, which helps lower the car in. As you can see, it's lowering itself in, it's not compressing, lessens the chance of any damage. Look at the back of the car though. Look how close it actually gets as opposed to the 90. That's because of the overhangs that are on the car. But look at the flexibility of the suspension. It's still working just as good. You heard a bang there, you probably saw the bang. The tow bar, that's the departure angle on the car. That's what we're going to be coming to later in the programme. But look at that, straight around that corner. Who said women can't drive like men? Okay. Now, this is its weak point here. Now you may notice here that Amanda, she may try and do it in one go. No, she's not going to. Yes, she is. I was hoping that Amanda might actually take a shunt just there. But just watch the back of the car now. Look, ooh. Look at it, the front slid, the back's just slid as well. That's the side slope capability and down to traction as well. You just see there, you probably can't see there, you may do, but look at the chassis on that section just there. It came very, very close to hitting the ground. That's the car's ramp breakover. If that happens, if you land on your chassis, the back wheels or the front wheels or all four wheels can be lifted off the floor and you're stuck. Okay, that's the 110 Defender. Plenty of clearances front and back. So let's try a Discovery. A lot of people think they're just using, probably 90% of them probably used on the school run or the supermarket run. Let's see how that tackles this terrain. Again, as before with all the other ones. Now this one actually hasn't got the front spoiler on it because of the winch. And you'll see again, now we've asked Ed to do this one slightly wrong. Just watch this. This is going to get stuck in a minute. And there we go. And as you can see, Ed's purposely put this vehicle into an axle twister. The wheels diagonally across are the wheels with the least resistance. So we're stuck. Now bear that in mind, because in a moment we're going to bring up Discovery 2. Viscous coupling with traction control in exactly the same place. Let's see how that copes. But in the meantime, I'm going to get Ed to reverse and pick a slightly better route so this car goes through. This is actually what we're going to be coming to later on. Ground reading skills. You know, a good driver would have actually, you know, from where they are now, they would be actually already assessing the terrain, looking at it, trying to read the terrain so they keep the axles level. That way you've got equal distribution of weight and drive. 50%. That's what you're trying to do when you do it. As you can see now, Ed's actually moved the car over about 3 feet. And look at the axles. You'll see that they actually stay a lot leveler. Got an increase in possibility of approaching. And just watch the front of this winch here. The overhang. Look at the approach angle. Look. See, just kisses the ground. And then look at the back. Look. Crunch. Crunch. 2 crunches. The tow bar and the rear quarter. Now, if Ed had been travelling faster over that terrain, we'd have got more body sway. It could have hit us even harder, and we could have been looking at parts of the Discovery sitting in the ground just here then. As you can see though, it's still tackling the terrain, and if you're listening to it, listen to that engine. It's just chugging away. That 300 TDI develops something like 160 pound-feet torque at 1750 revs, 1750 revs. Some cars have to get up to about 3000 to develop that sort of torque. That's what gives these cars the ability to go slow. And as a first-time off-road driver, this is what you've got to train yourself to do. You've got to slow down, you've got to lower the gears, and you've got to keep those revs down. And it will help you read the terrain, and it will help you steer a lot more controllably as well. As you saw just then, Ed actually took a little shunt then, again purely to set the car up, possibly to reduce the damage, but it also gave him a better line through there. You can see there, look how the suspension's working, but at no point in either of the coil, the Defender 90 with the coils, the Discovery, has a wheel come off the ground or lost traction, just like the series motor. But you can see, you may notice as we're going through here, the tow bar gets close, but the sills are actually getting very close. This is still ramp breakover angle. Again, there's a misconception that the ramp breakover angle is when the chassis lands. It's not. Look at the sill just then. Look how close it came to hitting the ground. Now, Ed's going to change vehicles now, and he's going to come through this section that we just got stuck a few moments ago, but we're going to come through with Discovery 2. TD5 Discovery with a viscous coupling, centre differential, and traction control. What is traction control? Traction control is, as you saw then, Edward was stuck, so the wheel was spinning. Traction control is the ABS computer. What it does, it senses the wheels spinning, and it applies the brakes to the wheels that are spinning. It tries to fool that differential to send the drive to the other wheel. And I think now you'll see a very vivid demonstration of how that works. Please bear in mind, what we're actually showing you now is a demonstration. This is technically how you shouldn't drive off-road. As you can see, he's lining it up totally wrong, because you can see from the ground here, it's an axle twister. You've only got to look at the holes. How were they caused? Now, watch this. He comes into it, he applies a bit of revs, and it drives. Now watch this, look. Bit of revs, up it goes, look at that. Even with that wheel off the floor, that car drives through there, not a problem at all. And he was controlling that by the accelerator. If you sit there on tick over, it doesn't quite work. You just have to apply the revs, and you apply the revs gently. And you saw how dramatic that is. It can be very unnerving sometimes. Now see, look, even there where Ray had a problem, he just had to apply the accelerator and off it went. Because what you've got to bear in mind, that these cars have actually got anti-roll bars on. They stiffen up the ride on the road. They actually reduce that body roll. You can go around corners faster. But because of that, they also lessen the travel off-road. But the traction control compensates it for it. It can be a problem though, because it puts the inexperienced driver in situations where they shouldn't be. Obviously with these cars now, you may be looking at the front of it and you may be picking up the bits of mud that are spattered on the front and the sills. Watch the back end, look as it goes down there, look, so close to hitting the back. If that had a tow bar on it, that would have hit that back of that car. And actually, I would prefer a tow bar on a car like this, because the tow bar is going to take the impact before the bodywork does. It's a lot cheaper way of doing it. Okay, so far we've covered leaf and coil. How about the new Freelander? How about torsion bar suspension with no low gearbox? Let's see how that copes with this terrain. Now this is an ex-Camel Trophy Freelander. Although it's got a fancy paint job and lots of bits and bobs on it, the transmission is still the same as your family Freelander that you would drive at home. Now as you can see, it's actually taken slightly. Now listen to this, look at it. Listen to all that noise, look at the speed he's having to go around here to get around this course. But he's still doing it, but it's a lot more violent. Look at that, look, wheels off the floor, body crashing down. If that was your pride and joy, you would have stopped just here, because you would have heard that first crash and thought, oh my God, the old man would now be shouting at you, the kids would be screaming, and you'd be petrified that you'd damaged your pride and joy. But it just proves that this car does it. A lot of people don't think it can. But look how it's going around this course. There, it's all protected though. It sounds horrible. And that's one of the things when you're off-road driving, you've got to train yourself. Some of the noises, because they vibrate through the chassis, sound terrible. But 9 times out of 10, the Land Rover mechanics and everything, the designers have actually took everything up out of the way, and it's all superficial bangs. So, how about that? That shows you how suspension works. Ground familiarisation skills. What does it mean? It's the driver's ability to look at the terrain in front of him, to set up the car, whether it be the gear, the speed, or the angle of approach. Let's have a look at the ground clearances of the four-wheel drives. The first one that we've got coming through is Ray in the Series 2. The lowest point of the car is the differential. As you can see, look how close it's getting, but also his springs are actually getting fairly close to the ground as well. Now the main point of that is that if the differential actually caught on the ground, or the ruts were too deep, it would lift the front of the car off the floor. He would lose traction. See, look, the 110, same size wheels, same sort of distance. Now, look at the Discovery coming through. It's a lot lower. Look how it's struggling. Look at the front spoiler. Look how it's designed. It's dug away to take a little bit. That's actually quite close again. You could damage the front of your car if you got that wrong. Now, let's have a look at the Freelander, the lowest of them all, plus torsion bar suspension. Still copes admirably with the terrain down there, but look how close it is. The skid guard all the way through. That's an aftermarket add-on, by the way. If you actually look back at the terrain now, you can make out the marks in the ground. Okay, that's one clearance, that's ground clearance. Now let's go and have a look at the other three: approach, ramp breakover and departure angle. Okay, we've just showed you one type of ground clearance. We're going to show you another one now. It's called the ramp breakover angle, and it's the car's ability to come up and go over a hill without hitting the chassis or the side of the car on the ground. So you can see now Ed's feeding the car in very carefully, watching out for other angles that we're going to come to in a moment. As he feeds it over, look how close the car starts to get. And look at that. As you can see now, the chassis is actually just touching the ground. The side sills of the car are touching the ground. Any more extreme, we could do serious damage to the car. But also as well, if you came over there a little bit too fast, as the car actually crests and goes over to the side, the engine can compress the suspension, squab the tyres, lessening that ground clearance and really smashing up onto that sill. Okay, Ed, if you'd like to take it off the hill. So that's it. That's the ramp breakover angle. Be very, very careful of that. Sometimes it's the little innocuous looking hills that can actually just get you sitting onto the ground or four wheels spinning and you're stuck. Now we're going to move over to approach and departure angles and see how relevant they are in off-road driving skills. Another two challenges for you and your vehicle. The approach and the departure angle. What are they? Where are they taken from? The approach angle is taken from the bottom of the wheel to the lowest protruding point at the front of the car. It's the car's ability to go in and up a hill without impacting that low point. It can be very, very expensive. Let's just see it in action. Okay, Ray? You can see he's going into it very slowly. Look at the car, just clearing. And he stops. Just remember, this is a set situation. Accelerating into that a little bit faster could have your suspension compressing and altering those angles and clearances. Now I mentioned another angle, the departure angle. What's that one? Same again, it's taken from the back of the wheel at the bottom to the lowest overhanging point at the rear of the vehicle. As you can see from this, it could be a very, very expensive mistake to make. The whole back of the car could be crumpled up. A very big dent in your credit card and your wallet. Now we're going to show you another demonstration using a different vehicle with different approach and departure angles. Here we are again with a different vehicle, a 110 Defender. As you can see, if you excluded the roller fair lead on the front, this has got one hell of an approach angle, which means it can actually go up steeper hills. Let's just see that in action. Okay, Amanda, if you could show us, please. You can see, look, inches of room on the front there. But what was that noise? What was that extra resistance? The departure angle has been fouled by the overhanging tow bar. The one good thing though about having a tow bar on the car is it actually protects the panel work. As you can see here, the rear bodywork of the Defender is actually well off the ground. The tow bar has taken all of the impact, so it may be something worthwhile remembering. Put something on the car to protect those vulnerable points. Now we're going to show you a few more skills associated with off-road driving. We've just demonstrated to you the approach and departure angles when the vehicle is climbing a hill. A common misconception is that is the only time that those vehicles will contact the ground. We're going to demonstrate to you now that when a vehicle comes down and exits a hill, you've got to make sure that the angles of approach and departure are still there. I'm going to get Amanda to demonstrate to you now using the Land Rover 110. Okay, Amanda. Now, Amanda's engaged first gear, which you should always do on dry, steep hills. And she's going to use the engine's braking coming down the hill. If you accelerate down the hill, you've got more chance of actually compressing the front suspension at this point and lowering the approach angle. But now listen and look at the back of the car. You can even see the tow bar moving with the weight of the vehicle going through it. But now Ray's coming down with the Discovery. More overhangs, less approach and departure angles on this Discovery. Now look at this, as you can see, any faster and that suspension would compress just there. It just kisses the exhaust pipe on the back of the car. Now we're showing you this now in perfect conditions. Please remember that with the family on board and loaded for an expedition, or actually coming down those hills faster and exiting away faster, the whole suspension can alter, altering those angles and decreasing them. Now earlier on I mentioned engine braking. We're now going to demonstrate to you and show you what exactly engine braking is and how useful it is in off-road driving. Engine braking, what actually is it? It's a four-wheel drive ability to self-brake, but not using the braking system as you know it. It's the engine's compression coupled up to the low gearbox, the low ratio in the first gear. It actually holds the vehicle back. It's a lot more safer than coming over these hills trying to hold it yourself on the clutch and the brake. Let's just see that in action. Okay, Tristan. What you're going to see now is Tristan's going to come over this hill as a novice. He's going to approach it in high gear, first gear. So he's hoping it's a bit safer. But as he can see from here, he can't see the hill. So he panics. His foot has come onto the clutch. He's gone fast. Oh my God, look at that. You know, it just shows it. And that was fairly grippy soil here. Now here comes Amanda. Not quite so dramatic. She's in first gear. She hasn't dipped the clutch though. So she's actually had a little bit of engine braking. And now here comes Ray. 2 1/4 petrol. First gear, low gearbox this time. Look at the difference in the control on that vehicle. You'd certainly be a lot safer with Ray driving you around this course at the moment. Now what you're going to see now is Tristan has come back round again. He's put it into low gearbox and he's also engaged the centre differential, which ensures that the drive stays at both axles. Now with a diesel engine, the compression on the diesel engine is a lot more than a petrol. Look at that. So I hope that's proved 1 point to you there. You've just seen the 3 vehicles now go down the hill. Out of control, under control. What happens if you don't put the diff lock in going down the hill? Well, potentially very dangerous. Because what happens is, with the weight transfers to the front, the axle, the rear axle becomes the one with the least resistance. So what actually happens is then is that one wheel starts to try and lock up. The car starts to pick up speed and it grabs it, it locks it up. Without ruts being there, it can actually pull the car out of line. Imagine going down the river on a boat or a canoe. How do you turn it? You put an oar in the water and the back turns around. That's what can happen going down a hill if you don't engage the diff lock. I'm just going to show you now as Tristan drops down this hill without the centre diff lock engaged. Okay, Tristan. Now even in first gear, in low box, he still gets the engine braking, but it's the traction that we're talking about now. As you can see, look at it, locking the wheels up. Now, obviously as well, that puts a hell of a lot of strain onto the half shafts and on the differential. As I said before, could be potentially dangerous. What can you do about that? Well, you can put the diff lock in to start with. That helps. So remember, for descents, the diff lock in. If you feel that happening and you've got the diff lock in, accelerate. Balance the car's speed to what it actually wants to go down the hill. Or, if it's really slippy and icy, go down in a higher gear. You'll go down faster, but you'll be in more control. Now, HDC. You've probably seen it when you looked at a new car. You've probably read about it in magazines. What is HDC? It actually stands for Hill Descent Control. Freelander and Series 2 Discoveries are fitted with it. That actually cures that problem. The Freelander needs hill descent control because it's got no low gearbox. What it does, it allows a vehicle to get to up at about 4.7 miles an hour, and then it applies the brakes to all 4 wheels and holds it at that speed. Discovery has got no centre diff lock. So what the hill descent control does, where that wheel was locking that you saw alternate wheels locking, it releases the brakes on it and allows it to come down the hill more evenly. We're just going to see Ray demonstrate this now, but what Ray's actually going to do, he's going to dip the clutch as he goes over this hill. Let's see what hill descent control does then. It's a safety aspect as well, because if somebody does panic in one of these cars, and as long as they're in low gearbox with hill descent control in, they won't have a problem. So Ray's just dipped the clutch now, and off it goes. Now, it went awfully quickly then, but then all of a sudden, the hill descent control got him. Now, you saw the brake lights come on, and you think, ah, he cheated. He didn't. That's the hill descent control. It actually grabs it, and it applies the brakes as well. And as you saw then, oh, flew straight over the hill. But like I said, no problems at all. The hill descent control was there. It's like a safety net for a trapeze artist. It caught him when he needed the help. Here we are now, back at the top of the hill. I'm going to demonstrate to you what a novice driver would possibly do when faced with this situation. So we're in first gear, we're in the high gearbox. People think, you know, because they're driving on the road in that situation, it's the lowest. Look how fast we're going already. We approach the top of this hill, the foot goes to the brake, we crash over. Oh my God, hear that? This poor old car is taking such a pounding doing this. That crunch that you heard was the gearbox cross member smashing onto the ground as the engine went over at such high speed, or the front of the car went over at such high speed. The engine compressed the front suspension, it squabbed the tyres, lessened our ramp brake over angle, and caused we impacted at great speed there. Now I was actually controlling a little bit by the brakes. A more novice person possibly would go over that hill with the clutch down, braking like hell, locking up the wheels. So again, under control is the key word that they want to look for in this type of procedure. Okay, we're at the top of the same hill where we've just shown you how to do it incorrectly. Now I'm going to show you how it should be done. So the first thing you should do is stop the car. Get out of the car and actually go and have a look what is down the hill to check your angles of approach and descent. Then you get back in the car and you engage low gearbox. If you have a problem engaging the low gearbox like we are now, don't panic. If you can't get that low gear lever in, all it means is that the actual gears are probably misaligned. Engage first gear, hold the foot on the brake and very slowly come off the clutch. And as you can see there, it's just slotted in nicely. All it does is lining up the gears. Now we're in first gear, the handbrake's coming off, and we're setting up the car for the hill. Already you can see the control that we've got. It gives us more time to set the vehicle up. It takes away a little bit of that fear and panic. Now the vehicle is set up and we're just cresting very gently over the top of the hill. You can hear the engine holding us back. Still hit a little bit, but not quite as much. But look at the control that we've got coming down here. We're certainly not compressing the front suspension, smashing the spoiler, and also then hitting the back tow bar as we pull away. Total control into second gear, and we pull away. Even though you heard the chassis grounding, believe you me, it was a lot less damage being done than earlier on when we actually hit it flying down there with 2 tons of car pushing down onto it. Okay, now this time this is a more extreme hill. This one's about 80-90 foot long and at least 45-55 degrees in places. So the diff lock is definitely in, my seat belt is on, I've got my approach set up, I'm heading dead straight for it, and my hands are going firmly on the steering wheel to give myself that support. Now, on this hill, I know there's a few undulations. I know I'm actually going to sort of like speed up because I'm going to go into an axle twist situation. So I'm going to cover the brake and the accelerator with my right foot going down. That means that I can either accelerate to equalise the speed of the vehicle out, or I can brake a little bit as well, which will slow me down. So here we go. First gear, low box, diff lock in. And remember, the approach is very, very important. Try and ensure that both wheels on the front axle and both wheels on the rear axle go over evenly. And off we go. You can see the angle of the car in relation to the ground. And at the moment, we're going very, very nicely. But there, did you notice it? We just picked up speed and I just shot forward just a little bit when the engine braking got me back again. That was the moment that I talked about when we actually went into an axle twister. So, you know, how did I know I was there? Well, I know the ground very well, obviously. So please remember one thing. Always get out the car and check. As I said before, just because there's a set of wheel marks there doesn't necessarily mean that you or your vehicle can do it. I've just come down at 80 foot, 45 degree hill. The maximum climbing ability is between 45 and 50 degrees of this vehicle. So now we're going to use quite a liberal amount of accelerator and an awful lot of momentum to try and get back up that hill. So second gear, diff lock in. You can hear the revs rising now. I'm accelerating into it and I'm really giving it all I've got now to get up this hill. And up she goes. She powers up the hill and ease off on the top. Looks easy. You probably saw the look on my face there because it is always a little bit of a terrifying moment, especially with a bit of a bend in it. But no problems at all there for this vehicle. Side slopes. What actually is a car's capability to go sideways? A lot of the time it's you as the driver. How far dare you take it? Most manufacturers say that their car will tilt to a point of tipping over between 30 and 45 degrees. It's dependent a lot of the time though on the terrain and on how the vehicle is loaded. Let's watch Ed come along this side slope on the Discovery and then we'll pick up 1 or 2 more points as he gets closer to us. Okay Edward, if you'd like to come. Now, the first thing that Ed has done wrong, he actually hasn't got out and looked at the side slope. It's one thing I will always recommend. Get out and look at it. This rock just here, a rabbit hole, anything that can unbalance the car if you're on that fine point between tip over and stability. Has he checked his load security? Has he looked in the back? Has the heavy suitcases? Has he got them secured down? At the moment in time, there's actually nothing on this roof rack. As you can see now, that top side wheel is just on the point. Look at that, that's nearly off the ground. If you try to pull away now, you'll see that wheel spin. Because what's actually happened here is that the weight has transferred. It's compressing the suspension on this side. The coil springs on that side are pushing the body over. Of course, the extra weight of the roof and the roof rack is actually accentuating it. It's making it lean further. A lot of roof racks are actually higher. So when you've got a load on them, they alter the centre of gravity even greater. It's fine here, but if Ed actually came closer now, that rock could actually kick him up. I'm just going to move this rock out of the way before Ed goes, because after all, it is my car. Okay, Edward, if you'd like to leave the scene. That just goes to show how high that car is. That's on the point of balance there. Now, as you can see now, Ray's coming in. Slightly narrower wheelbase, narrower tyres. Again with the roof rack on. But look at that one. That one actually sits higher off of the roof. So with heavy loads on the top there, again that emphasises the side slope capability of the car. Well, it actually emphasises the centre of gravity. See, Ray is still a lot lower. Now, as he's coming into us now, if Ray holds it there, it actually doesn't look much of a side slope, and that's what most people are very unaware of. They're driving along and it doesn't feel much. We're just going to go over now and show you another situation. It's actually a slighter angle than this one. It's only about 26 degrees. Side slope. Here we are again at a different angle. Now, we just showed you one at quite extreme. Probably at least 42, 43 degrees. This one, however, as you can see, probably only goes up to about 28. As I said before, it's not necessarily the angle, it's the ground conditions, but also the driver. Let's just see what happens now when Ed does it all wrong. Okay, Ed. As you can see again, he's approaching it. Unfortunately, he hasn't got out and checked it again. But just what happens to this? He's actually oversteering into the hill. He's driven up too high. And look what happens now. That little bit of wetty, muddy approach as well doesn't help. It actually, look at this, just watch this now, and wow. Now, if that was you, you would do exactly what Ed's done. If you notice, the car's actually said to Ed, it said, Ed, I don't want to be up there. But Ed has gone, yes you are. And he's turned the wheel into it. And look, as he's coming along here now, he's actually on full left-hand lock. A little bit more increase in resistance, so he's accelerated. So he's coming along here now, accelerating, and whack. Over it goes. Stop. As you can see, these vehicles transmit a lot of information back to you. When that car slid then, it actually told Ed, it said, Ed, I can't get any grip up here. But just like the novice driver, Edward actually misunderstood the readings and steered into it. As he steered into it, he increased the resistance going forward. So he accelerated to overcome that. And then he shot over here. Totally out of control. Now, Ed was actually doing that in control. But you as the novice driver could be accelerating and thinking, what the hell's happened here? And splash. That's it. And talking about splashes, let's go and do wading techniques now. What actually is wading? It's the car's ability to go through water. Well, how deep can it go? Well, that's dependent on the vehicle in the range that you're looking at. This is a series Land Rover. Probably around here somewhere is an optimum depth to go on without doing too much preparation to it. By a rule of thumb though, I would always recommend that somewhere between the centre of the wheel and the top of the wheel rim is a fairly safe depth, apart from anything like the Freelander, which actually has an air intake a little bit lower. The engine bay. Now, this is a petrol engine. As some of you are aware, petrol engines are very susceptible to water. We've got a coil, we've got HT leads, we've got a distributor, we've got alternators, lots of electrical components in here. If they start to get water on them, they can start to cause a misfire. A misfire is the last thing that you want when you're going through water. So how can you cure that, or how can you stop it? Well, you can liberally coat the old engine bay. Well, not the whole engine bay, probably just the electrical part, the leads, the distributor, the coil, in WD-40. You can put an old blanket, a car mat, anything over the front of this grille to stop water going through the radiator and being sprayed by the fan all over the engine. In the middle of a lake, that's the last thing you want. In a river crossing, you don't want it misfiring. You need all the torque and the power you've got. Now, This is the air cleaner. Very, very crucial part of the engine. This is where the engine actually breathes from. If we actually went over the depth of that and sucked water in, we're in deep trouble. We actually what they call hydraulic the engine. It comes to a stop. What's hydraulic locking? Imagine that you were in the swimming pool and you come up after being underwater and you took a gulp of air and somebody pushed you under. You choke on that water. That's exactly what the engine does. It chokes, but sometimes it can't choke enough and it stops the engine. Just very, very serious damage. So please, 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 identify where that is on your engine. It's in various places. It's on the wings, on either side of the wings. On the Freelander, it's down below. So check before you go wading. What else can we check? Well, where the engine joins the gearbox, there's actually a hole in the bottom of this thing called a bell housing. Now why is there a hole at the bottom there? Because where the engine joins the gearbox, it has to be joined by something that's shaped like a bell, which is why it's called the bell housing. Now, at the back of the engine and the front of the gearbox, there are oil seals. If they leak, they don't actually allow oil to get into that bell housing. Well, unfortunately, the clutch is in there. So there is no way of that oil to get out. It would gradually fill up with the time you kept topping the engine up. The oil then would get and contaminate the clutch. When the clutch is contaminated, it's had it. It will slip. But the problem is that where the oil can come out of that hole, water can also get in. So you can actually buy a special little plug, bolt, whatever you want to call it, and it actually seals that hole up. Okay, that's the petrol engine. How about this one, the diesel engine? This is not too bad. It's actually a lot better engine to go wading with. It's not susceptible to water. In fact, overall, the diesel engine, as opposed to the petrol engine, is probably the slightly better engine. Now, I know some of you may argue with me against that, but we prefer it here at ProTrax. It's a lot better torquey. It's a little bit more reliable sometimes as well, especially what we put it through. But as I said, less susceptible to water. It's got high pressure pipes here instead of HT leads. It may help though still to put a blanket over the front because it stops water going through. It stops it getting onto the electrics of the alternator, the little bits and bobs down here that just make certain electrical components work on the engine. Again, we've got an air filter on this side. It's just here. It sucks in through the wing. This one's got a snorkel on it which helps it a little bit. Please remember though, this is just a brief description. Just research it a little bit more thoroughly before you actually start doing deep wading techniques. We're going to show you shallow wading to start with. So this is shallow wading with a Discovery. So why have we just done all that preparation to our engines? Well, let's show you. Let's put a Discovery through this short water section. But first of all, how deep is it? Well, that's the next procedure. And this is when we're training people, they always say, how deep's the water? And that's what you have got to find out. The driver or the co-driver has now got to get out of the vehicle and test it. So let's get somebody else to do that, shall we? Ed and Tristan, can you come please? As you can see, they approach, but they're not driving straight into the water. That would be a very, very foolhardy thing to do. Just because there's a set of wheel tracks in and out, you don't know what made those wheel tracks. So Tristan's going to have to come in now and he's going to have to wade through the water. Now, some people come up and just have a little stamp around. You've got to walk through that water. He's walking centrally, as you can see, he's having a good prod around. Because although the water may be 6 inches, 7 inches deep, how do you know how soft it is in there? It could actually sink in about a foot, which would be fatal having your car midstream bellied out. So here he comes, look, treading very, very gingerly now as he gets very carefully into the deeper water. But there's no obstacles. You can see his feet, he's spreading his feet out. There's no rocks, so we've got no problems with actually fouling the underneath of the car. We're not going to hit the diff, we're not going to take the spoiler off. Once he's happy, he's going to turn around, he's going to give Ed the thumbs up, and Ed's going to come in. What sort of speed is Ed going to do? There's 2 wrong ways and a right way to do this. We're going to get Ed to do the wrong way first. Okay, Ed, if you can just do it slowly first, please. So what Ed's doing now, he's actually coming into the water very, very slowly. This is not the way to do it, because unfortunately he's pushing no water away from him. It's building up in the door, seals, going in. And stop, please, Ed. Okay, you can reverse out of that one. The problem is with coming slowly like that, is you've got no momentum. If the car actually does start to sink into the mud and the suction starts to track it back, you need to be able to accelerate. You could probably accelerate in first gear, but it's instant revs. The wheels spin and you're stuck. But the unfortunate thing is as well is that if the water was any deeper than that, water would be coming up in the engine bay. It would be hitting the pulleys, it would be being sprayed all over the engines. Now let's get him to do it faster. Okay, Ed, let's do it faster. Whoa, Ed. Let's try that again now, a little bit better. Now, it's amazing how much water you actually push in front of you. Now, that looked very, very dramatic, didn't it? But the problem is that without that blanket on the front, you imagine the amount of water that got rammed through that radiator, got sprayed all over the engine. Not the best thing to do, not by a long shot. Now let's try and do it properly. So what we're going to do now, we're going to come in very, very gently, second gear, accelerating as we go. Here he comes. Okay, Ed, let's try that. So you can see, second gear, and he's pushing. And he's pushing the water in front of him. He's in fact making a bow wave. That's the best way to tackle water. Now people say, is there a set speed? There isn't really. We've used the Discovery that time because with its spoiler low down, it actually pushes more water in front of it. You could have a 110 with big wheels on it. You need a lot more water, a greater depth of water. So realistically, what you've got to do, you've got to sit there, you've got to look out your window, you've got to see that bow wave, and you've got to keep attacking it. You've got to push it with you. Now, that's shallow wading. Let's see what you can do with a well-prepared vehicle. Now let's try and demonstrate and show you what to do if the water gets that little bit deeper. Ray, if you can just help me now, please. Now, on a Defender, there's a few extra things you ought to think about. A snorkel. And what it does, it raises the car's breathing ability. It actually sucks in from just there now, not from just here. What Ray's actually doing over there is that intake, similar to this one here, is actually the air intake for the fans inside the car. Well, in a moment, Ed's going to be going fairly deep water, and it will come up over the bonnet, and one of the places it falls into is the air intake for your fans inside the car. Now that is directed via like a little bathtub effect into the heater box. Too much water in there can actually overload the heater fans. They can't turn, so they blow a fuse. Or, worst possible case, they will actually burn out the motor. The next thing is this just here. It's actually an additional air intake for your car, as some of you know. But of course, if the water's going to go over the bonnet, where's it going to go? Straight in there. Nice cooling effect for the legs on a hot day. So Ed, if you could shut that, please. And once again, you would have to walk this water. You've got to wade it, you've got to check it exactly as we've just shown you before. Now, however, if this was actually a fast flowing river, never ever try and cross it at right angles. The force of water hitting a 110 or a 90 or even a Discovery sideways on could actually displace the car. It could knock it straight off the road, and then you've got a major problem. Okay, Ed's going to demonstrate actually how to do this now. High and low gears, or a high and low gear box. What actually is it? Well, if you own a family car, you've actually only got a high box. You've only got 4 or 5 gears. Four-wheel drive vehicles like the Land Rover have 2 gearboxes, the high and the low gearbox. Well, a third gearbox if you count the transfer gearbox. Let's concentrate on the high and the low box though. The 5 gears that you normally drive in are actually in the high box. They're predominantly for road use. For terrain like this, where it's not too rough, it's not too boggy, there's not too much resistance. However, when you actually start to go off-road, over hills, down through mud and everything, you need a little bit more control over the vehicle. You need to alter the torque input to the car a little bit. So actually stop and you put the vehicle into low box. It lowers the overall gear ratio to the car by 2.5 times. Let's just try and show you visually. What we're going to do here now is Amanda's in the 110. She's in high gearbox. Tristan is in low gearbox. They're going to set off at a roughly 900 to 1,000 revs. They're going to set off in a straight line. You'll see straight away that Amanda will actually start to take the lead. But Tristan's got a little surprise in store for Amanda. Okay, guys and gals. Now, as you can see, Amanda's already taken the lead. But what's this? Haha! Tristan's got a little surprise for her. Because of Tristan's ability to be in low gearbox, he's actually got the ability to climb, which is a lot more than what I have sometimes. He's got more control over the vehicle, but if you can hear, he's still not exerting a lot of revs. However, Amanda is revving away. She's in high box, she's going around there. She's taking a lot longer journey. Tristan's still going on, even steeper climb now. I'm going to give up just there. I'll let Tristan go on his own. That's a little demonstration there of what the difference is. If Amanda had tried that in high gearbox, trust me, she would have stalled the car. Why would she have stalled the car? Let's show you that now. Okay, we're back here with Tristan and Amanda again. Same vehicles. Now this is the hill that a little while ago Tristan came up and caught up with Amanda when she was in the high gear box. So why didn't Amanda come this way? Well, it's because she was in a high gear box and she hadn't got a lot of revs on. She wasn't developing a lot of torque. What's torque? Well, torque is the ability to turn something at low revs. It's the engine's pulling power. Now, unless you actually get a few revs on, so you need to accelerate gently up a hill, you can actually drop off what they call the torque curve. So you've got no power in your engine. We're going to demonstrate that now, how using the low gearbox actually alters the torque figures. It actually brings in that torque that little bit lower down. So, Amanda's in the high box, Tristan's in the low box. Let's go. Now, once again, you'll see Amanda just shoots off, but whoops-a-daisy, look what's happened. She hasn't continually kept accelerated. Tristan, however, because he's in the low gearbox, doesn't need to. He's slowly pulling himself up this hill, just like my leg muscles, just pulling away gently. Got all the time in the world. He can read the terrain. Very important part of off-road driving, obviously, is the ability to read the terrain. Going slow like that gives you that ability to do it. So, we've just showed you Amanda failing the hill and Tristan clearing it with no problem. Let's now go over to hill climbs. Let's teach you how to do those. You've just seen Amanda fail a hill in first gear high box, and then Tristan just trickle past her on tick over. Let's try a little bit steeper hill. But first of all, a few relevant points that you really ought to look out for. Ground reading skills. What are they? It's the ability to look at the ground. Now, look at this bit here. You see the ground's been polished off. That's where the underneath of one of the vehicles earlier on has actually impacted on the ground. That could impede the vehicle's progress, but also damage the underneath of the car. If you look further down the hill, look at the deep ruts. So you've got to ascertain what ground clearance you've got. And remember, it's your diff, your axle, or your springs on a serious Land Rover, or the whole underneath of the car on a Freelander. Now, Tristan's going to come up this hill the first time in first gear, low gearbox, with the diff lock in. If you notice at the moment as well, Ray's sitting just out of shot. In case Tristan found it and he went hurtling back down here, it would actually smack straight into the back of Ray. Very, very expensive. So never ever follow anybody up a hill. Okay, let's see what Tristan can do. Okay, Tristan. As said before, this is purely for demonstration purposes. He's just coming into it nice and slowly. Look at the ground clearance. Watch the wheels, look at the ground clearance. The diff is very, very close. A slight spin on the front wheel just then, but nothing special. And why? Why wasn't there anything special? Because of the traction, because of the tyres, which we'll come to in a moment. Here comes Ray. Now look at the clearance on the spoiler on the front. Actually got slightly chunkier tyres on as well. So up he comes. Now this vehicle is fitted with traction control. As you saw then, the wheel started to spin, and as Ray decelerated, the tyre stopped spinning. Now that was probably a dual method there. By decelerating, it allows the tyre to actually regain traction, but also the traction control cut in. So that was fine, that was easy. Why was it easy? The torque of the vehicle and the traction and the tyres. As you can see now, we've conveniently wetted this hill. With the chalk content on it, it's made it very, very slippy. And also, always remember, when the vehicle goes up a hill, the weight transfer is towards the back axle. So the front axle is the one that becomes the one with the least resistance. So now I'm going to get Tristan to come up there in first gear, low gearbox, with the diff lock in. And let's see if he can rely on traction this time to get him up. Okay, Tristan. So here he comes again. Just slightly accelerating, which you should always do into the hill. Just keep accelerating gently into the hill. Now he's backed off a bit there, look at that. The wheels are spinning. As you can see on the front axle, the driver's gone to the wheel with the least resistance. Also on the back as well, we're down to two-wheel drive and we're getting nowhere. Hasn't he made it halfway up the hill? Okay, Tristan, stop. Now, what Tristan has actually done now is actually done a failed hill climb technique, but we're going to come to that in a minute. Tristan's going to go back down the hill now, and he's going to use momentum. He's going to engage second gear, and he's actually going to accelerate into the hill and continue accelerating up the hill until he gets the car level on the top, and then he decelerates, which gives him time to assess the situation again and actually manoeuvre out of the hill. So here we are, second gear, accelerating into the hill. Okay, Tristan. Now even with standard road type tyres on, this technique will get you up the hill. Up the car comes on, a little bit of, and as he decelerates there, even though he got a little bit of wheel spin, the fact that he can decelerate actually put him back into traction again. That's why second gear is a lot preferable, second or even third gear in some engines. If you come up there in first gear, it's too responsive. You put the throttle down, it's instant hit at the wheels spin. Remember, you always need to keep constantly accelerating up a hill. Not excessively, just gradually. You need that ability to be able to decelerate just fractionally, which I say will allow the wheels to regain traction again. Now we're going to try Ray with the Series 2 Discovery. Let's see what Ray does with traction control. So as you can see, he's coming up. Same as Tristan was the first time. First gear. Now there's no diff lock on this vehicle. It's actually got a viscous coupling. So it automatically selects. He gets wheel spin. Look at it, look. As you can see, the brakes are being applied, it's sending it across the car. But because of the little lip on the right-hand wheel there, it cannot get up the hill. You can see what the traction control is doing. It's actually sending it across the axle. It's trying to get it to grip, but it can't do it. Okay, Ray, stop please. Why didn't Ray make that hill, even with traction control? Well, if you take a look at the front right-hand wheel, there's actually a rock sticking out. It's increased his resistance. The tyres couldn't even grip on that one. As you saw, the traction control was actually, it was sending it across the axle. It was trying to give it a grip, but it just didn't work because of the resistance. So how do you overcome resistance? Well, momentum helps that. And what is momentum? It's the car's kinetic energy. It's speed and mass together. So we're going to go back down this hill now, and Ray's going to come up, as Tristan did, in second gear, accelerating into the hill. And even on your standard family four-wheel drive vehicle, with standard basic off-road tyres, momentum will actually get you up this hill. Okay, Ray, let's try that one, please. Always remember to back far enough away. Too many people stop right at the base of the hill. The speed that you can get up from the front of the bonnet to the base of the hill, that depicts the amount of momentum, kinetic force the car's generating. Okay, Ray. Now he's starting off in second gear. Remember, you can do that. And look at this. Up the hill, a little bit of wheel spin, but the traction control just cured that straight away. No problems at all. So, that's the basic way to tackle hills. Just a few other pointers though. Remember one thing. Open hillsides on wet, slippy grass are probably a definite no-no. Use a hill like this one, if you have the chance. One that's got ruts in it. That way you're a little bit like a Scalextric's driver. It keeps you in there. The worst thing that can possibly happen is if you go up a hill and the car actually goes off of line, left or right, because the weight of the vehicle can actually carry it through and put you in a potential slide and tip over situation. Now, as we've mentioned previously, setting the vehicle up, lining it up for its descent, for its ascent, for any particular piece of ground that you're going through, especially undulating ground. But look at this here. Tristan's positioned this car now. He's just slightly off the track. But what's going to happen? Well, two things. First of all, the car's going to slide into the ruts. It's going to position Tristan. It's going to say, Tristan, get in here, boy, it's safer. But Tristan, as he did on the side slopes earlier on, will turn into it because he'll think he should be over there. Well, as he turns into it, he's going to increase the resistance. But let's just see that. Okay, Tristan. Now off he comes. He's coming up very slowly. He thinks he's doing it right. And it slides in. Bang, look, he's turned into it. And he's put more lock on. And just that increase in resistance has actually stopped him as well. If you look at the front of that car now, the tyres are actually turned into the ruts. The sidewalls are actually taking one hell of a pounding, or they could be on slightly narrower ruts. So remember that. We very rarely ever, on our training vehicles, wear a set of tyres out. Normally the sidewalls are slashed, and it's something you don't think about. It is the weakest part of the tyre on some of the tyres. Another point to remember in the future when you're selecting equipment for your vehicle, think in the future. Don't think in the next few weeks, because you may progress into something more adventurous. Hill climbs, failed hill climbs. Why did you fail a hill? Well, there's two reasons. You either run out of traction and just literally sit there with the wheel spinning, or you've selected the wrong gear, or your engine hasn't got enough torque and you've stalled it on the hill. Let's show you two recovery methods now to get safely out of a failed hill climb. So I'm approaching the hill, I'm making sure my diff lock's on, I'm a Defender on my early Discovery or my Range Rover, and I'm accelerating into the hill very gently, holding the wheel firmly, selecting the most direct, safe route up the hill. But I'm not accelerating too much into it, which I really should be. And I get to a point, then there's resistance, and as you can see, and you can hear, the wheels are spinning and I'm stuck. There is no point in sitting there, accelerating, it won't do anything. You clutch and brake at the same time. Hold the car here. As you can hear, the engine's still running and we're being held on the hill. So what do we do then? Well, we select reverse gear. We check that it's in reverse gear by coming off of the clutch and listening to the engine note change. And then the most important thing is we must check that our wheels are straight. Now, if our wheels aren't straight, as previously you saw Tristan, when he went into it, he actually went like that because the car slid him into the ruts. We need to lean out the window. Now, it's quite difficult sometimes with a kinetic seatbelt. So be very, very careful. You may have to take your seatbelt off to be able to look out of the window. And then lean out of the window. And you need to check that your wheels are straight. If they've not, straighten them up. If you fail to do that and you're on an open hillside with no ruts available to hold you there, the possibility that you could actually slew across the hillside and put yourself in a dangerous position is a point worth remembering. Now, we're safe there. Try and get a seatbelt back on, but I say unfortunately we can't do it because of the inertia. Next thing we do, we check our mirrors. We check that nobody's behind us, which is a damn good reason never to follow anybody closely up a hill. If you notice, I'm still holding myself firmly on the foot brake. That is applying pressure to all four wheels. I'm braking all four wheels. Never use the handbrake in a situation like this. It won't hold you. Now, we've done everything. We're in reverse. We check we're in reverse. We've checked our wheels. We're holding the wheel firmly. We've checked our mirrors. We're quite happy to go back. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to bring off my feet off of the clutch and the brake simultaneously as quick as I can. Look at that. That's impressive, isn't it? And it just takes you back down under control without a problem. Now, what happens if you do it wrong? So here we go. We go up the hill. I'm going up to it in second gear. We're powering away. This is great. You've just seen your friend do it. And all of a sudden, it spins. You panic, dip the clutch, And we're going all over the place down here. As you can see, if somebody had been waiting at the bottom of this hill for me to clear it, and we'd have had a panic attack, it could be very, very expensive. Now, we did say there are two ways of actually failing a hill. The first one just demonstrated loss of traction. The second is you stall it on a hill. You stall it because you selected the wrong gear. You've gone up in too high a gear without enough revs on. So what do you do then? Well, I'll show you. So second gear, diff lock in, and up we go up the hill. Now remember I said you've got to keep accelerating to maintain that momentum, but sometimes when you get here you go, what's over there? I can't, and it stalls on you. Now at this moment in time, do not go for the clutch. Hit the brake. Brake all four wheels, don't go for the handbrake. That extra resistance of actually being in gear really, really does help us and hold us on the hill. Then we select reverse. Now we very, very slowly come off the clutch, and then even slower, feed your foot off of the brake. You can just hear and see us moving back slightly. But what we're doing now, we're being held by the engine's compression and the low gear of the vehicle. Now, I did say come off the brake slowly, and the reason is that because in the panic, if you've actually missed reverse gear and you come off that brake and you've gone, you're flying back down that hill. A few pumps on the brake, you've lost your servo, so you've got no braking system at all, you've got no power steering. Now let's check our wheels again. Very, very crucial part of the procedure. And once again, I can't move because of the inertia of the seatbelt. So please be very, very careful if you have to do this and you do take your seatbelt off. Lean out of the car and have a good look and check the front wheel is straight. Don't ever open the door. If you go out the door like that and the car slips, it is possible to catch in the ground and wreck the door. What do we do now? We still check. Safety, safety, safety all the time. We're checking our mirrors, find out that nobody's standing behind us taking a picture, or that your friend is right behind you. Now this time, depending on which side the key is, we put one hand on top of the car. We reach down and we just turn the key and we start the car in reverse. And off she comes. Controllable. Now, a lot of situations people panic, and I would always recommend, even if the car starts to spin, if you're unsure, because sometimes trying to remember two methods is a little bit difficult, use the stalled method. Use the one I've just showed you. Stall the car, hold it on the hill. It gives you that little more time, and don't rush the technique. Take your time and think about it. Now we've got another type of terrain for you to tackle. It's a ditch crossing. It could be a set of ruts left by a deep, tractor, wet day, a big lorry, you may be one side, you want to get to the other. This one is actually formed by water cascading down the hillside following a set of old tracks. You could find this type of terrain in the Welsh mountains, in Morocco, lots of mountain tracks in Europe. The whole idea though about crossing this is try and lessen the resistance. How do you lessen the resistance of a four-wheel drive? Well, in this area here, we're actually going to come through at an angle. We're going to come through at 50 degrees, 45, 50 degrees. It all depends on the wheelbase of the car. I think you'd agree that if you drive into that one head first, try and cross it, we're going to do ourselves an awful lot of damage. So here we go. Amanda's bringing this car in now. She's coming in very slowly. She backs off the throttle. That stops the engine compressing the front suspension, and then we could hit there. And look at this, one. Another point of resistance there. The third point of resistance. The fourth is there. The offside wheel. You heard a slight scrapping noise there. That was just a tow bar just kissing the ground. But other than that, we had no problems at all coming through there. You've just seen a fairly challenging ditch crossing. Ed now in the Discovery is going to show you something a little bit more extreme. Okay Ed, take it away. As you can see, he's approaching the ditch very, very carefully. One thing you should always do. Acceleration at this point there will compress the suspension. Impacting could be quite hard. Departure angles again, but again, he took it out there very, very carefully. I think you'll agree, that's quite an impressive ditch crossing. Well, so far, we've showed you when it goes right. Let's see what happens when it all goes wrong. Ed's approaching it now very, very slowly, very cautiously. That's a hell of a ditch to go in, as you can see. At this point now, he's balancing it on the brake and the throttle, just feeding it in purely for demonstration purposes. And as you can see now, at this point, this car is very, very finely balanced. A little bit of extra speed, a little bit too harsh a braking, and you'd have seen this car somersaulting over. Very, very expensive. So please don't try this at home. That was Ed giving us a demonstration of what can go wrong coming in from the wrong angle downhill. Let's see what happens to Tris coming in at right angles. Okay, Tris. As you can see, he's lowering in for a start, then he's panicking, dipping the clutch now, thinking, oh! As you can see, if that was the front of your car, you'd be grimacing. But also, notice the impact. Now you know why earlier on we mentioned passenger and load security. Now, we find that most people drive from the ears forward, where in reality, off-road driving, you actually got to think of the back of the car a little bit. Pretend that you've got a caravan on the back of it. As you can see Ed now, look, here's the obstacle. Ed's cleared it with his front, he's happy, but he's turned too soon. Wham! Straight into the back of it, look. Now, if that had been a rock or a tree stump, it could have severely damaged the sidewall of the car. So remember, when you go off-road driving, wherever you're going, rutted paths, mountain trails, just take that little bit of time. Think, count, 1, 2, 3, and then turn. Could save your tyres. Before you go off-road driving, there are a few basic vehicle checks that you want to go through. The windows, this is for your own personal safety. If you're driving down a bushy, tree-ridden lane with branches, overhanging branches, any foliage, it could come along, hit the window, come straight in, smack you in the face. Wind the window up, gives you a little bit of airflow through the car, no problem. The mirror, fold it in. Carefully. It has been known for a branch to actually hit the mirror and put it straight through the window, covering the driver in glass. The aerial, push it down, get it out of the way. Again, you could be driving along a branch, you see the branch coming, but your instincts are to swerve away. What are you going to drive into that side? So put it down. The snorkel, if you've got one, anything that protrudes out of the car, the snorkel, even the roof rack, branches could get tangled up into it. So have peripheral vision. Look all around you, not just on the ground in front. What else? Let's look in the bonnet area, the engine bay. Before you go off-roading, check the power steering, the brake, the clutch, the water levels, the clearance on the air intake for the fans, and the washers. Very important if you're going through muddy ground. Check the lights are clean. Anything else? Well, identify your lowest points. Identify the ground clearance, the differentials underneath the car. Anything else? Fuel. You need at least half a tank of fuel. Some people say a full tank, it just depends on where you're going, but always check your fuel. Down the side of the car, again, the passenger mirror, that wants putting in. Make sure the passengers have got their windows shut as well. There's nothing worse than seeing children hanging out of cars or even just poking their head out just when you're going down a branchy lane. Side steps. If the wife's got in or the children have got in, put those down and you drive away. If these get caught and get pushed right up into the sill, it can seriously damage the side of the car. So make sure they're up and tucked out of the way. That's ramp brake over angle and ground clearances. What else? Tyres. Let's have a quick check of your tyres. I'm not going to go into tyre pressures now, just run them at standard tyre pressures. Anything else? Hooks, exhaust. Let's look inside the car. Look at this. All this loose equipment here is waiting to injure somebody. Nothing's tied down, nothing's secure. If this car dived into a ditch, tipped over, all of this is going to be flying around inside the car. Not very safe at all. So if you've got loose equipment, ensure that it's fixed or take it out. The same with when you're tackling any type of terrain. If you think it's going to be dangerous, get the passengers out, get them to walk away from it. Let's take a look at a better prepared vehicle. Now, as you can see, this Discovery is a little bit better prepared. It's got a dog guard, ideal for attaching implements too, but it also stops anything that's in the back flying and hitting you in the head. When could that happen? You go down a hill and get it wrong and you impact on the front. Anything that's loose in the back is going to come flying forward. These cases help secure items in. The old Zarge box here, ideal for keeping pieces of recovery equipment in. The Pelly cases, perfect for computers, laptops, even your cameras, videos, anything like that. Tow ropes, everything's accessible, very easily to get to. But it would also help as well if we had some straps or anything, or somewhere in the floor to secure items too. Is there anything else now that we need to do before we go off-roading for the first time? Well, we need to look at a few basic tools, some basic items of recovery that we need to take with us. You need a rope, but make sure it's a recovery rope from a specialist. How do you attach that rope to a vehicle? You need a shackle, just like the one prepared on the Discovery. Otherwise, how on earth are you going to connect this large eyelet to a very, very small opening on the front of the car? Now, the front of your vehicle has two attachment points on both chassis legs. You may want to use something like this, a bridle. It spreads out the force, distributes the load evenly. If you do get stuck, good old army shovel. Multitude of uses. If the going gets heavy, the branches get big. Good old machete, chop your way through. If you don't want to get out of the car, little snip, very, very handy. A backup recovery rope, sometimes very useful, especially if you're stuck a long way in deep mud. If you don't want to get your hands dirty, use a set of gloves. After your basic equipment, what else actually makes the vehicle go that little bit better off-road? Well, tyres. Tyre choice is very, very crucial, and there are so many in the marketplace. But we've got three here just to show you. This is a standard compromised tyre. It's probably 80% on-road, 20% off-road. It's a little bit better. It's an all-terrain pattern. As you can see, the cleats in the side will actually clear the mud better. Will give us more traction when we sink into the mud a little bit. However, this mud tyre here, as you can see, look at the tread pattern. It's a lot more open. It lets that mud pump out the side, digs down, gets more grip. It's a very expensive additional item for your vehicle, but trust me, it's the best investment you'll make. After checking your vehicle and loading your equipment, one thing you want to keep in the forefront of your mind is when and how to use the centre diff. It's simple to use in both high and in low box. You push it across to the left. When it engages, the orange light on the dashboard glows. When you disengage it, when you're through the problem area, the light goes off. If it doesn't go off, it's giving you an indication that you've got gearbox wind up. So you can accelerate and deaccelerate. If that doesn't work, stop and reverse until the light goes off. Now, is there anything else to remember when you're using your diff lock? Well, don't use the clutch. It's designed to put in and out on the move. You assess the ground. You look at the ground in front of you and you think, Christ, look at that. It's mud, it's muddy, it's deep water. I'm going to have a problem driving it. Use it then. When you're through the situation, knock it off. So we've just been driving along quite a smooth track, but now we're going to do some serious off-roading. So the first thing I'm going to do now is stop and engage low box. It's a simple movement, just push the lever forward, and as you can see, this actually isn't engaging smoothly, so don't panic. Engage first gear, keep your foot firmly on the brake, and ease the clutch off while pushing forward. There you go, look at that. It slots it in nicely. And off we go. Using first gear as a descent into the water. Now, as we approach the water, because we don't really want to be going through water in first gear, we've got no momentum and it's too much instant response. Engage in second gear and accelerate through the water, increasing the speed as we go. Now, if you notice on that one, we didn't actually use the diff lock. That's only because we knew it was shallow water. Now for this next section, it's an actual twist and it's steep downhill. I'm pushing the diff lock across to the left. Just a nice sharp push across to the left, slightly angled when you're in low gearbox towards the windscreen pillar will help it engage. Now for this, I'm thinking of the back of my car. I'm actually turning into it quite tightly, thinking about the rear of the car, turning into it gently. Look at the speed that I'm travelling. Very, very slowly. It gives me time to manoeuvre the vehicle. So our diff lock's in, our light's on, we centralise the car and off we go down the hill. Holding the wheel firmly with both hands. Now I don't know whether you can notice that I've actually done something wrong so far because I haven't put my seatbelt on. Now it's always advisable to actually put your seatbelt on when you're off-road driving, just in case. If there's a sudden stop, you misunderstand the ground, you're going to hit the car. So now we're through the situation that requires diff lock, so let's disengage it. Now I've disengaged it, but we're actually slightly on the turn. Now, so the diff lock is actually working against itself at the moment, so it won't disengage. Once I change gear, the light comes off, no problems at all. But we're coming up to another hill, so let's put the diff lock back in. And we're accelerating up the hill in second gear. Just keep gently accelerating. Nice and smoothly up the hill, decelerating gently as we come off the brow of the hill. If you actually decelerate too soon, and decelerate, I mean take your foot off the accelerator, if the rear wheels are actually still over the back of the hill, then like, you know, there's an extra increase in resistance. Round we go again in second gear, constantly taking the diff lock on and off and setting ourselves up to go back downhill again. We've actually left the diff lock in at the moment because we do need it in because we're going back downhill. Now when you're going downhill, please make sure that you keep your left leg away from the clutch. Put it underneath the brake. It takes away the temptation that if something does go wrong, to dip the clutch. And as you can see there, things get rather violent when we do that. Now you may think you won't do that, but trust me, if it's your first few times off-roading, you will. It's just that natural thing that you've got. It's a bit like a baby in a dummy tit. It's comfort. And you feel safe. When you've got your foot on the clutch and on the brake, you feel very, very comfortable. Nice gentle little turn now. Just brings us in up the hill. Turns very, very gently in. Eases us over just in case of the ramp breakover angle. Now we're going to start another big steep hill climb. Now, I'm not going into second gear for this one, purely because I'm looking at the hill. I can see there's loads of traction. My diff lock is still in. And I'm just accelerating gradually up the hill. The other reason I haven't gone into second gear is because I know at the top of this hill, I've actually got to make quite a sharp left turn. If I don't, on the right-hand side of me now is quite a severe side slope, and it could have us on our side. I've got a little climb out of here. Again, it's fairly smooth, just a little bit of power, but lots of traction. So the car can still tackle it. Now I'm clear. Flat open ground in front of me. So let's take the diff lock off. Now, it hasn't gone off instantaneously. Don't panic too much yet. Change gear. That could help, and it has. By changing gear, or actually accelerating and de-accelerating, it takes off some of the loading that's on the centre diff. And the light's gone off. However, please remember, if that light doesn't go off after a continuous time with the diff lock lever, being in the out position or the off position, stop and reverse, because it means you've got gearbox wind up and it means that the gears cannot separate. So here we go again now. We're doing some general smooth driving around in second gear. Positioning the car again, thinking of the back of it. I'm actually taking quite a wide circle into this hill. Into first gear and diff lock in, all before I actually start to make the descent. And down she goes, very, very carefully. It's amazing control that the engine and the gearbox have over 2 tons of vehicle. Again, maintain the momentum. Dip the clutch, the car rolls, we go into second gear, nice and smoothly. The whole thing about off-road driving is having a smooth technique. It didn't look like it then though, did it? That's just a sudden hole in the ground that I didn't see. But no sudden steering, you know, no, like that. smooth braking, gentle acceleration. Don't rush your gear changes. Here we go again. Diff lock still in. Quite a steep climb coming up, but once again I can see there's actually a lot of traction. So let's just see, let's use the vehicle's torque and the traction, the BF Goodrich track edges that this tyre is fitted with. Look at that, it's impressive, isn't it? And I think once you get out there and start to tackle the terrain with your own four-wheel drive, you'll be as impressed as I still am with the capabilities of these vehicles. Down the hill again we go, still leaving the diff lock in. A lot of people actually have a bit of a problem in remembering when and where to put the diff lock in. One simple rule of thumb is actually look at the ground in front of you and think that you were going to walk it. If you're going to walk up a steep hill, you'd exert more energy. You'd need extra traction probably as well. So use the diff lock and use the accelerator. If you were going downhill, you would step very cautiously, be very careful. So back off the throttle, engage the diff lock again for extra grip. If you were going through mud, etc, etc, apply torque, apply power. Up we go again, nice and gentle, really, really in control of this vehicle. And that's the whole thing. While you're going slow like I'm driving now, you're in control. The faster you go, the slower your reactions become. It's very important. It's a bit like having a wild dog. People say they can sense if you fear them. I sometimes think a four-wheel drive's a little bit like that. If you start to go fast, it'll take control of you. And then all hell is let loose. Once again, as you can see, slight side slope. But once you practice those will be the worst things for you. Over the hill we go again. Descent, look at this. It's incredible really, like I said before, what actual, the compression of the engine coupled up with the low gear of the car is wonderful. Into second gear again, maintaining that momentum. And then once again, once we're through the situation, diff lock off. And again, it hasn't come off, accelerate, de-accelerate, de-accelerate, and it's just come off again. Now always remember, when you're driving, that the ground conditions will keep continually changing. If you've gone to an off-road driving day, it may rain later in the afternoon. That'll affect the hill. The constant patches of certain vehicles. So something that you drove 1 hour earlier may not be as simple as what it was, with a little bit of rain and the continual passage of vehicles passing mud and everything up it. Okay, we're coming up to another descent now. So once again, I'm engaging first gear, I'm pushing the diff lock across. I'm back on the steering wheel with both hands. It helps me brace it. And I feed it through my hands constantly. It's very, very crucial that, to keep both hands on the wheel. If you don't, the uneven resistance is when you're going down this hill. Just watch it now as it starts to pull. You can actually just see it moving slightly. But on a severe hill, that could be very, very extreme. Never cross your hands like this. Never turn the wheel down or go like that. There are so many turns from lock to lock on the steering wheel. You'll tie yourself in knots and you won't be in control of the vehicle. So once again, we're doing a little bit of convoy driving now. We're starting on the far side of the quarry. I've got the 110 and I've got the Discovery quite close behind me now. Keep on following through all the time, nice and gently. Accelerating just when you need it, okay? That's the key. Too excessive, the body roll starts to bounce, and if you keep accelerating over rough terrain, you get a pendulum effect. The car just starts pivoting from side to side because it's a suspension rebounding all the time. On hill climbs, just keep that nice, gentle approach. Back off down hills. Hover with your right foot between the clutch and the brake, just in case you need to cadence brake. As we're coming down, don't change gear under load. Look, dip it, it rolls. Into second. When I meant dip it, I meant dip the clutch. Rather than changing gear in all the mud and the water that we're going through now, it just avoids any unnecessary resistance. I'm driving around now, I'm just in general second gear. It's a very good flexible gear, even third could be, but it's a little bit rough here. As you can see, I'm dipping and diving all the time. And why put the vehicle and you and the passengers through unnecessary harm? Accelerating gently. Look, a bit of resistance there, so I'm just accelerating again because I know the back wheel. Bear that in mind. I felt the front wheel hit a slight rock or a sharp incline, and I knew my back was, so I accelerated just very, very slightly. Quite a delicate downhill operation now. So we're setting the car up, first gear, taking a wide swing out because it's quite close on that side, and the car dives over. It gets very, very close to the sills. Now we've got a bit of a water section. Accelerating gently all the time through the water. Well, hopefully now we've inspired you to go off-roading, but remember the basic rules. Try not to go alone. Take a friend in his vehicle with you, just in case you get into a situation. Understand the maps. What is a byway? What is a RUP? Remember the land access issues. And last but not least, remember, as slow as possible and as fast as necessary. That's what my grandmother used to say. Have fun practicing. That's where I'm off to now.